If you think you know people well, you might be wrong. Because sometimes a person's true face is revealed only when there's no way to escape them. My name is Victor. A few years ago, I started distancing myself from the world. I preferred being away from crowds, noise, and people. Whenever I had the chance, I would spend a weekend alone in a small cabin deep in the woods. It was no different that winter. I rented an isolated cabin nearly 2 hours outside the city. The first night was completely normal. I cooked dinner, read my favorite book, and went to bed early. The next morning, however, while hiking through the forest, I thought someone was following me. The sound of dry branches snapping seemed to trail behind me wherever I went. Every time I turned around, there was nobody there. Nothing but trees. Nothing but silence. And I had absolutely no idea that this was... I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head. Hearing strange noises in the woods wasn't unusual. Animals moved through the forest all the time. But the farther I hiked, the stronger the feeling became. It felt like someone was watching my every move. Sometimes I heard rustling in the bushes. Other times, a branch would snap somewhere behind me. I'd spin around instantly, but every time there was nothing there. Only trees. Only silence. By then, any enjoyment I had gotten from the hike was gone. My heart was beating faster, and a growing sense of unease settled in my stomach. Eventually, I decided it would be better to head back to the cabin. By evening, the temperature had dropped even further. I made dinner and tried to read for a while, but my mind kept returning to what had happened in the forest. I poured myself a few drinks. Slowly, the tension began to fade. Around 11 p.m., I was sitting alone, listening to music, when suddenly, knock. Someone was at the front door, and in a remote cabin deep in the woods. There shouldn't have been any visitors that late. The moment I heard the knocking, I froze. I immediately turned off the music and slowly walked toward the door. The cabin's front door was made of thick wood with 2 small glass panels near the top. I looked through the window. There was nobody there. For a moment, I convinced myself it had just been the wind. I had barely turned around when... Knock, knock, knock. The sound came again, this time much louder. A chill ran through my entire body. I walked back to the door and looked outside once more. This time, someone was standing there. Because of the darkness, I couldn't clearly see his face. I quickly switched on the porch light. As soon as the light illuminated him, my confusion only grew. He didn't look homeless. He didn't look lost. In fact, he looked completely out of place. He was wearing a black suit. His hair was neatly combed back. His face was clean-shaven and perfectly groomed. He looked like someone who had just switched on the porch light. As soon as the light illuminated him, my confusion only grew. He didn't look homeless. He didn't look lost. In fact, he looked completely out of place. He was wearing a black suit. His hair was neatly combed back. His face was clean-shaven and perfectly groomed. He looked like someone who had just stepped out of and somehow ended up in the middle of the forest. But at 11 p.m., deep in the woods, what was a man in a suit doing at my door? And there was something else. Something I couldn't explain. The way he was looking at me didn't feel normal.
Without opening the door, I called out, "Are you okay? What do you need?" The man stood there in silence for several seconds. His eyes remained fixed on me, but there was no expression on his face. Then, in a voice, he said, "I was passing through here with my girlfriend. We got separated, looking for her for hours. I got lost. Something about the way he spoke felt wrong. There was no fear in his voice, no panic, no concern. It sounded like he was reciting a script he had memorized. Then he said, "Can I come inside? I need to use a phone." Every alarm bell in my head started answering immediately. "No, stay where you are. I'll call the police for you." The man was silent again. Slowly, he turned his head towards behind him. Then, in that same lifeless voice, he said, "I need to come inside." I frowned. "Why?" He looked directly into my eyes, and for the first time, something about his stare genuinely frightened me. Then he said, "Because there's something out there." A pause. "And if I don't get inside," another pause, "I'm going to be in trouble." A wave of cold swept through my body. "Trying to stay calm," I said. "I'm calling the police. You can either wait there or leave, but I'm not opening the door." The man didn't react. His expression didn't change at all. I had just turned away to grab my phone when, bang! A violent punch slammed against the door. Then another. Bang! Bang! The entire cabin seemed to shake, started trembling. I rushed back toward the door and shouted, "Back away! The police are on their way!" But the words died in my throat, because from the other side of the door, I heard laughter. Slow, distorted, and completely unnatural. Until that moment, the man hadn't shown a single emotion. But now, he was laughing. I cautiously looked through the glass panel, and what I saw made my blood run cold. His face was only inches away from the window. I hadn't even heard him move. 1 second he had been standing near the porch steps. The next, he was right there. His eyes were locked onto mine. Then he smiled. A wide, unsettling smile. And in a calm voice he said, "Victor, just open the door." My heart nearly stopped. I had never told him my name. I hadn't introduced myself. There was no mailbox outside, no sign with my name on it. Nothing. Yet somehow, he knew exactly who I was. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This man hadn't stumbled across my cabin by accident. He had come here looking. My mind stopped working for a few seconds. The stranger had said my name. Not just my name. He had said it as if he had known me for years. Fear shot through my entire body. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone. Without wasting a second, I called the police. I told the dispatcher that a strange man was trying to break into my cabin deep in the woods. They instructed me to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and wait for officers to arrive. The moment the call ended, I looked back through the window. But this time, the man was gone. The porch was empty. The driveway was empty. Even the forest surrounding the cabin, as if nobody had ever been there. I checked every window, every angle around the cabin. Nothing. There was no sign of him anywhere. The next 15 minutes. The moment the police cruiser pulled up, I practically ran outside. The officer calmed me down and asked me to explain everything in detail. I told him about the strange man, his emotionless voice, the way he pounded on the door, and the most terrifying part of all, how he knew my name. The officer listened. He looked visibly confused. He said that none of the nearby residents had reported seeing anyone suspicious. Then he suggested that if I felt unsafe, I could spend the night at a hotel. I immediately agreed. The two of us walked toward my car. Then suddenly, the officer stopped. The color drained from his face. "What is it?" I asked nervously. Without saying a word, he pointed toward my vehicle. I looked, and my heart sank. All 4 of my tires were completely flat.
When we got closer, the truth became even more. The tires weren't just flat. They had been slashed with a sharp blade, which meant the man hadn't gone anywhere. He had already made sure I couldn't leave. He had cut off my only way out. And maybe he had planned to keep me trapped there for the
sight of my tires made my legs feel weak. If the police hadn't arrived when they did, I would have been trapped in that isolated cabin for the entire night. And just thinking that the man might still be hiding somewhere nearby sent a chill down my spine. The officer helped me calm down and told me to get into his patrol car. During the drive, I couldn't stop looking out the rear window at the forest. Over and over again, I felt like someone was standing among the trees. About 20 minutes later, we arrived at a small hotel. The officer was kind enough to stay in the lobby until my father could be reached. That night, I went to my room, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same face, the face pressed against the glass. And I kept hearing that voice, "Come on, Victor." The next morning, my father arrived and arranged to have my car towed. I returned home. It didn't end there, because for months afterward, whenever someone knocked on a door, my heart would start pounding just like it had that night. And I always felt that maybe that man had found me. After that incident, I almost completely stopped visiting remote cabins in the woods. Time passed. Slowly, I began returning to a normal life, but the memory of that night never truly faded. Then, about 6 months later, my life took another unexpected turn. My father passed away. We never had the best relationship. He wasn't a bad man, but somehow we never really understood each other. After his death, the lawyer gathered us, and what I heard completely surprised me. My father had left his old cabin in the woods to me. Some of my friends joked that it was probably his final prank, but it didn't feel like a joke. Not to me. I already knew I was going to sell the cabin. Once the paperwork was completed, I was informed that the property needed to be cleaned out and repaired before it could be listed for sale. I figured it would be my last chance to see the place, and maybe my last chance to say goodbye to my father. But I had absolutely no idea that someone else was waiting for me inside that cabin.
The following week, I arrived at my father's old cabin. It was so strong that I immediately stepped back. It smelled like the rotting corpse of a dead animal that had been lying there for months. But my father hadn't died here. In fact, he hadn't even visited the cabin in over a year. I searched the entire place, every room, under the couches, inside the closets. I opened every cabinet and storage space I could find. Sign of a dead animal anywhere. The strange thing was that the cabin looked exactly as I remembered it from my childhood. The same old chairs, the same bookshelf, the same worn-out couches. It felt as if time had simply stopped inside those walls. I spent the entire day cleaning. But throughout the day, one thing kept drawing my attention. Faint noises coming from above my head. Soft sounds being dragged across the floor, or someone moving very slowly overhead. That's when I remembered something. The cabin had an attic, and maybe, just maybe, whatever was causing that awful smell was hiding. The noises from above continued without stopping. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal, maybe a squirrel, a raccoon, or something else that had gotten into the attic. In the hallway at the back of the cabin, there was a small attic hatch. From the ceiling, I pulled the rope, and the wooden hatch opened, dropping a ladder down. I slowly climbed up. But the moment my head entered the attic space, a wave of stench, that I started coughing. It was far worse than the smell downstairs. After a few seconds, I steadied myself and swept my flashlight across the space. My brow furrowed instantly. The
The entire attic was filled with trash, empty beer cans, chips, garbage scattered everywhere. I was shocked. My father might have been a messy person, but not like this. Something felt wrong. I began cleaning up a little, but exhaustion didn't let me stay long. As I climbed back down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't been alone up there. And by nightfall, that feeling would become something far more terrible. That night, I fell asleep early, but I didn't rest properly. Around midnight, I heard it again. The same sound from the attic. Scratching, shifting. At first, I told myself it must be an animal, but the rhythm was too steady, too controlled, like someone was walking slowly above me. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just playing tricks on my mind, but the sounds kept getting louder. Eventually, I got up. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly moved toward the hallway. The closer I got to the attic entrance, the tighter my chest felt. When I reached underneath the hatch, I froze. The latch was open. The ladder was already hanging down. My heart started racing. I remembered it clearly. Then I noticed something on the floor. A wrapper. The same one I had seen in the attic earlier. But now it was down here. How did it get there? I picked it up, and in a mix of anger and fear, I sat in the living room, but my mind refused to calm down. Every little sound made me jump. The creaking of the wooden floor, the faint knocking sounds coming from inside the walls, and the occasional soft rustling still drifting down from the attic. I switched on a lamp, hoping the extra light would make me feel safer. But the warm yellow glow only made things worse. The shadows in every corner seemed to move. I kept telling myself it was just exhaustion, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But then my eyes landed on something near the couch. An old blanket. I was certain it hadn't been there before. Slowly, I walked toward it. And the closer I got, the more certain I became. There was something underneath it. Something moving. Very slightly. My breathing stopped. In that moment, I knew this wasn't my imagination. I wasn't alone in that cabin. Someone else was really there. I stood just a few steps away from the blanket. The entire room was silent. The only sound I could hear was my own rapid breathing. I stared at it carefully. The blanket was rising and falling ever so slightly, as if someone underneath it was breathing. I noticed something sticking out from beneath one corner. An old, dirty boot. At that moment, there was no longer any doubt. There was a person hiding under that blanket. I sprinted toward my car as fast as I could. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door, jumped inside, and immediately started the engine. As I began backing out of the driveway, my eyes drifted toward the cabin's front door. And then, the door slowly opened. A thin man with messy hair stepped outside. His clothes were torn. His face was covered in dirt. And his eyes were fixed directly on me. I slammed my foot on the accelerator and sped away from the property. A few minutes later, after putting a safe distance between myself and the cabin, I called the police. Officers arrived. By the time the man was gone. During their investigation, the police informed me that my father hadn't visited the cabin in many months. It was possible that a homeless person had moved into the attic and had been living there for some time. That would explain the trash, the smell, and the strange noises. One question still bothers me to this day. If that man was simply looking for a place to stay, why did he spend the entire night hiding? And when I was standing only a few feet away from him, what was he thinking beneath that blanket? My
never returned to that cabin. A few weeks later, I sold it. Whenever I hear an unfamiliar sound late at night, I think about that blanket and the stranger hiding underneath it. The stranger who may have been silently watching my every move. Because sometimes the most terrifying things aren't ghosts,